Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar at the Fintech Times. My name is Richie Santosdiaz, and established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We at the Fintech Times report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world as an authoritative and trusted voice. With more cybersecurity and cyber attacks reported last year than ever before, it's no surprise that many fintechs are moving towards a zero trust security framework. After all, financial organizations have a lot to lose, financially as well. Despite knowing that cyber attacks and ransomware are off the charts in recent months, many financial organizations are still leaving large parts of their IT security to trust, without the means to monitor nor manage privileged access. So today's webinar will be exploring how zero trust directly impacts financial services and how a shift to working from home during the pandemic has highlighted a desperate need for zero trust within the sector. I'm pleased to have experts in the panel who will also be discussing the critical role that privileged access management, or PAM, can have in the financial services industry, why these organizations are a target, and some key tips. So first, how and when to engage in zero trust. Second, how to mitigate risks successfully using zero trust strategies. And finally, how to update from legacy applications and architectures to ones that support. So I'm here today to introduce and be with an esteemed group of panelists. So panelists appeared in my screen. I wanted to introduce you all to the audience tuning in today, and be sure to follow us on social media, as well as engage in the conversation. So the first person I wanted to introduce is Morey Haber. He is the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer at BeyondTrust. The second panelist today is John Clark. He is the Senior Director at the US at Royal Park Partners and a former fintech banker. Finally, we have Deepak Mathur from KPMG, who is a managing director as part of KPMG's cybersecurity services practice. Welcome to today's panel. And before we get started, panelists, I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves to the audience, to those that are tuning in today. So, Morey, can you quickly elaborate on yourself, your career, and your company?
Certainly. My name is Morey Haber, and I'm the CTO and CISO for BeyondTrust. I help oversee the high-level strategy for the organization, as well as the internal security and cloud security for our solutions. BeyondTrust is a leader in the privileged access management space, managing credentials, vaulting them, rotating them, as well as secure remote access sessions, all of which can be deployed in a zero-trust architecture. As for myself, I'm also an avid writer. I have several books published on Amazon that you're welcome to look me up by name, covering privileged access management, vulnerability management, and identity governance. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much, Morey. John, do you want to introduce yourself and your career to the audience tuning in today?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much for having me, Richie. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is John Clark. I'm a senior director with Royal Park Partners. I'm heading up the US operations for the firm. Prior to joining Royal Park Partners, I co-led the private capital markets team at FT Partners for 3 years. And prior to that, I worked in private equity at a growth equity fund here in New York called Longridge Equity Partners for 4 years. And I'm a mentor with Techstars here in New York, and really enjoy the startup scene across fintech. Royal Park Partners itself, we're a corporate advisory firm focused on providing capital raising, M&A, and pre-IPO advisory services to financial technology companies across the globe. So thank you for having me, and look forward to a lively discussion.
Thank you for that. And finally, Deepak, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience as well?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on this panel. Deepak Mathur, I'm a managing director in the KPMG cyber team based in the Bay Area in the US. From a career perspective, I've been doing management consulting last 15 years, very focused on technology and security with a number of industry segments. Zero Trust has been top of mind for KPMG and our clients. So I'm leading a group of professionals here in the US and globally to focus on Zero Trust. We have put together a center of excellence so that we can serve different industry segments, work with a lot of technology partners that we have, and bring the best solutions to the market. Happy to be here and contribute. Looking forward to a great session.
Excellent. Thank you for the introductions. So before we begin with the panel, I wanted to give the audience a bit of agenda in terms of how it's going to look like. So obviously, I'm going to be asking the panelists questions throughout, and feel free after. We're going to try to allocate some time, if available, to have a little Q&A with yourself. So for those tuning in, feel free throughout the session to send any questions you might have for any of the panelists. So now let's begin with Zero Trust, the panel. So my first question to all three of you is what exactly is Zero Trust? And specifically, how does it pertain to financial services? So I'm going to go in order in terms of the introduction. So Morey, may you begin answering this question for us.
Sure, and I'll try to keep it concise because I could probably talk for an hour on the topic. In a nutshell, there's a webinar for that somewhere. First off, Zero Trust is not a product. It is a solution. It is an architecture. It is a methodology to provide authentication using policies and administration for real-time behavioral analysis, regardless of where the connectivity originates or where it is resolved. Essentially, you're not depending on network controls, access control lists, or the perimeter for your primary security functions. The ability to connect to any resource anywhere is independent, but the whole model suggests that anything that is authenticated does follow a dynamic policy on a per session basis, and everything that's being performed is analyzed to determine if the behavior is correct. Once you get those fundamentals in play, then you have to think of what solutions can fit there, what architectures can be used, and most importantly, what things will not adapt to Zero Trust. And that's where people tend to get in trouble, and hopefully we'll discuss a little bit about that today.
Great. John, do you want to add to that? Do you have your own interpretation of it? And
it's hard to follow. It's hard to follow Morey on this one.
Sorry.
I equate it to a brick and mortar bank. You walk into a bank, there are security cameras everywhere. You're a consumer walking in, you want to access the vault. Well, guess what? I can't just walk in and go into the vault. You have to be an employee. You have to have the proper access codes where all the cash and valuables are stored. So it's a very similar function and functionality into what banks have today on the Zero Trust side, as well as Fintechs. As Morey said, there's just a variety of permissions that need to be put in place in order for people to get into the security system or into the system itself. So at the end of the day, you just don't want to, you don't trust anybody inside or outside your perimeters. And that's kind of how I think about it, in addition to what Morey said.
Excellent. And Deepak, I mean, I'll trust you to answer this in your own interpretation. So how do you see Zero Trust and it's pertaining to financial services, coming from a management consulting background?
Yeah, like, I mean, as Morey and John talked about, so many definitions out there, and I get to have my own, but I can't keep it simple. I almost think about this as a perimeter-less approach to security in a distributed ecosystem of data and workloads, right? Because, I mean, the ecosystem right now talks about workloads and where workloads can operate. It can be on-premise, it can be multi-cloud, it can be private cloud. So we are already in a perimeter-less ecosystem. And how do you secure a perimeter-less ecosystem? Through inducing different trust measures, as well as following certain principles. That to me is Zero Trust, right? Now, the key component here is that trust is no longer binary as it used to be. And we need to establish multiple mechanisms and continuously verify trust of a human, of a non-human. You can like look at anything in the ecosystem, and it's like multiple trust sources should come together to verify things so that I can give you access or you can do things in an ecosystem. Now, just one more thing I would add here, and we can move on. Zero Trust, as Morey talked about, it's not a product. It's really a security model. But the principles of Zero Trust are key, which we all need to keep in mind, right? I mean, there are some key principles. For example, how would we embed segmentation and micro-segmentation, or how would somebody follow the principle of least privilege? How can you monitor and provide visibility to every transaction that happens in your ecosystem? And how can you graduate to a context-aware mechanism of evaluation? I think if every organization followed those principles as they're designing the Zero Trust architecture or the Zero Trust capability model, I feel they'll be on the right path. With that, back to you, Richie.
Thank you for that. So my next question for the three of you is then, why is Zero Trust needed now more than ever? And obviously the main kind of arching theme around financial services. I mean, why is it needed now more than ever? I mean, John, do you want to kick it off here in terms of that question, answering that from your background?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just given the past couple of years, we've seen Equifax failure to install software patches that affected 143 million people in the U.S. We have JP Morgan's failure to install two-factor authentication, which released names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses of 83 million account holders. July of last year, Dave, Challenger Bank, exposed details on 7.5 million users on the dark web. And then even going back a little further to 2016, when the bank heist in Bangladesh's central bank, fraudsters were able to steal $101 million by exposing a SWIFT network issue. So I think taking those factors into consideration, our information is becoming more and more accessible to fintechs. Banks have our information readily accessible, and it's becoming more and more evident that cyber attacks are on the rise, and it's designed, these fraudsters, hackers are leveraging very sophisticated and non-sophisticated solutions to break into organizations. So, criminal networks are organized, and we need to make sure that the tools that are being used within banks are simple enough that these hackers aren't accessing that information, don't get that information. So it could be as simple as putting together a governance policy to ensure that there are two-factor authentications, or cloud devices are being monitored correctly. Work from home is being monitored correctly as well. I mean, there's a variety of tools at their disposal. Implementing those solutions do take time and are costly. There's no one vendor that does everything in a box. It's something that an entire organization has to embrace, and the cyber team has to work with the rest of the organization to ensure this is something that's at the forefront of everybody's mind.
Excellent. I mean, Deepak, do you want to add to that in terms of your opinion of why is it needed now more than ever? Do you agree with John? Do you disagree? Do you have something similar in terms of what you want to elaborate?
Oh, absolutely agree with John, and I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. That's the first question we get asked all the time. Why now? Why Zero Trust now? And I think, as John alluded to, just like the world around us is changing pretty constantly. We have been seeing this digital transformation trend for the last 5-6 years, especially in the financial sector, aggressively kind of catching up. And I think that brought a lot of new threat vectors, as well as solutions that require a Zero Trust model, right? So that was key. I'm sure all of us remember bring your own device programs that were a hit and a miss back in the day. A lot of organizations tried BYOD programs, but now again, after we saw what happened during COVID and this whole push of work from anywhere model, I think BYOD is getting more popular again, and I think Zero Trust can help. And then, of course, last but not the least, the ransomware incidents globally and some of them that John highlighted. I think everybody is at a consensus now that you need to relook at your security architecture, and security architecture cannot live in its silo. It is the enterprise architecture. So I think the opportunity now is really significant for security professionals and leaders to really look at it from an enterprise perspective and partner with their IT, their business stakeholders, and solve enterprise architecture through Zero Trust. So I feel like digital transformation, obviously what we saw during COVID, work from anywhere, all the issues around ransomware and things like bring your own devices are really kind of fueling the need for Zero Trust.
Excellent, thanks for that. So BYOD, how about my interpretation? Bring your own defense. So Morey, can you elaborate on your own different interpretation of this? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have something else similar?
I agree with my my colleagues on this, but I would expand it a little bit in a different context. We've had the digital transformation, as Deepak has indicated, for the last 5 years. But what has happened in the last 2 years has really accelerated the need for Zero Trust. We did see lockdowns. We did see key workforces leaving the office buildings, leaving secure data centers, leaving those trusted networks to perform similar functions anywhere, at home. Some people took Airbnbs and went far away so that they could at least enjoy the outdoors, but we're still doing the same job functions. The authentication models that we have in place, to Deepak's commentary, were not sufficient. We had people working in any place of the globe performing the same functions and relying on just two-factor and a VPN, and maybe the country of origin is not one we really want them doing that type of access from. So Zero Trust helps us state, look, we're not going to use those perimeters anymore as our primary security strategy. We have to deal with the threats, as John indicated, of ransomware and other types of malware attacks, because doing that remote access needs to do or get better. Enabling RDP on the internet, putting a VPN client on a BYOD device is awful, just bad security practices. So we have to look at how are we architecting our environment to allow someone to continue to work from anywhere, whether it's 2 days a week, full-time, or even 1 day a week. How are we going to mitigate the risks from the modern threats like ransomware? We don't want that exposure. VPN technology is well over 20 years old and has a ton of its own faults. We need next-gen type of security approaches. And Zero Trust, again, not a product, a solution-style model architecture, when applied to many of these technologies, can get us to that point where we can safely say the perimeter is not my defense, ACLs are not my defense, but I can give that same work experience to the person elsewhere. And again, it doesn't do things like air-gap networks. It has trouble with things like PCI DSS 4.0. Those are things that you really have to consider if you're going to shift that model and who you're going to apply it to.
Thank you for that. So moving on, the next question is, what types of organizations then should be, kind of elaborated a bit earlier, but what types of organizations then should be embracing Zero Trust? I mean, Deepak, I'll let you start. I mean, what do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I feel there's no restriction for an organization to not go down the path of Zero Trust. It's like not meant for one industry over the other. I think what we have seen in the last couple of years, I think every industry has been impacted by changes in the workforce, changes in again business models, whether it's B2B, B2C, or B2E models, and I think Zero Trust is for everyone. I would say like the ramp on to Zero Trust can differ for many organizations, and that is what the focus is. If I am a big bank, I may be doing things already that align to a Zero Trust model, right? An example is multi-factor authentication or network segmentation. I think banking industry, because of the regulatory regimes they have to follow, have been investing in those security models over the years. I think the next graduation point for them is to start looking at more threat intel, more visibility into their ecosystem by bringing everything to a single pane of glass, because there's so much traffic going on, and having a better handle on what the zero trust model talks about, the north-south and the east-west traffic in your environments, right? So north-south, as we know, is like from an endpoint to a resource, which is typically remote or within your perimeter as well. And east-west is lateral movement within data centers or cloud workloads. I think having better visibility in those traffic patterns and understanding how things are authenticating, who has access to what, and how am I measuring continuous threat. I think those are the next evolution for some of the financial ecosystems. But again, back to the question, I think it's valid for everyone, and pretty quickly it's becoming the de facto approach for almost every industry. But they have to follow and find the right ramp on to a zero trust model, because every company would be at a different maturity level.
Thanks. Morey, is it for everybody? Is it only for financial services? What do you think? I saw you're nodding your head.
Yeah, respectfully, I have to disagree a little bit with Deepak, and that's what makes these sessions so great. I don't think it's for every solution for every company. I think it has a great fit for the vast majority, however. And the reason I state that is when you look at what zero trust is, but from a pure NIST 800-207 directive perspective, that standard, or something that we can all embrace, we realize that there are certain tenets that many things existing today just can't evolve to. It can't be improved to embrace zero trust. So I encourage organizations to think about what their new security initiatives are. Can they be implemented around zero trust? Because if you're doing it new, then you can embrace it a lot easier. That's the on-ramp. If you're revitalizing, refurbishing, or updating something that you're already doing today, then you may be able to embrace zero trust. And that on-ramp may be a long path down the road because of architectural changes, philosophical changes, regulatory changes, a lot of things that need to occur in order to say, I'm going to adapt this process, this workflow, to be at least close to the zero trust model. And then there are places that you just can't. If you have a network technology, custom applications that are dependent on network ACLs, it's going to be very hard unless you adopt an enclave model to make that happen. And many environments have embraced peer-to-peer technologies for industrial IoT, for camera systems, for auto updates. I mean, look, Windows 10 uses peer-to-peer technology for auto updates unless you explicitly turn it off. So it's very hard to embrace a lot of zero trust if you're using legacy peer-to-peer and other types of technologies that have a vast amount of technical debt that go against the tenets of zero trust and rely on the network and secure networking technologies in order to operate. So I encourage organizations to look for something new. If you're doing a new project, that's a great way to embrace it. If you're revitalizing, how do you get to that on-ramp? But be very cognizant that something like the SWIFT networks, which is air-gapped, a very big part of a financial organization, or a PCI zone, which is completely segmented, must have an established perimeter with gateways and proxies, don't adapt well to zero trust.
Thank you for that different point of view. That was very insightful. I mean, John, now, do you go on the Morey camp? Do you go on the Deepak camp? Do you have your
I'm
own
kind
camp?
of in between, and it is everybody should take at least the first step and figure out what they need and understand, where they have issues. And it takes the entire organization to embrace change. That's the first step. You have to. There's no silver bullet for zero trust. It might not work for everybody, but the organization does have to collaborate as a whole between their cyber team and their, the daily users of the system. And, you're right, Morey, some systems aren't, you have legacy IT systems. It doesn't adapt easily and rapidly to new agile technologies. So sometimes there's just lack of common standards for zero trust to really work there. But I think you do have to take the first step to understand what you need, where you have gaps, and how you can fill those gaps. And on Swift, I mean, Swift did have a hole. They did close it up after the Bangladesh bank heist, but they figured out where there were gaps, and it takes, maybe it doesn't work for everybody, but community banks, regional banks that don't have the massive budgets that tier one banks have should really start taking a look at zero trust, because I think the vulnerability is higher there than it is with a tier one bank. With MiFID 2, with the plaids, the finicities that are gaining PII information on consumers, and all the startups that are out there across Europe that get this information as well. I mean, I think, at least within fintech, there are certain groups and technologies that are out there that should really start, if they don't do it today, they should definitely start putting an eye at what their governance policies are and how they can remediate any of the issues that do come up and will come up over time as attacks do come to play.
Excellent. So yeah, with this topic, obviously different opinions as we see right here in terms of that question. And I want to I'm aware of time as well. So audience, feel free to keep sending questions in. Thank you for those. And I have another question for the panel right now. Is then, where has the thinking behind zero trust emerged from? I mean, Morey, can I get your thought on that in terms of the thinking behind zero trust, and where has that emerged from?
Well, it originally came from Forrester years ago as a network type strategy. It was originally called ZTNA for network architectures, and it has evolved. Some vendors picked it up as their taglines. They embraced it in a variety of ways. And then we saw the standard definitions come out from NIST on what it means today. The hard part about where it's evolved from to where it is today is, as you can see from this panel, there is no single definition. There is no single right or wrong. And respectfully, we can have this discussion and say, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, it means this and it means that. But there are some things about it that we can all agree on based on its evolution since the original introduction from Forrester and now the embracing from other analysts and other communities. It is that no matter how you authenticate, doesn't matter the perimeter or anything else, you can't do that binary approach that my peers stated. You have to continuously monitor to make sure that the behavior and the usage is appropriate. If you could at least get that one tenet correct, then you can improve your own security posture significantly. And I think that one piece is a fundamental drive from the original definition that everyone should think about.
Great response. Thank you for that. John, do you want to add to that in your kind of world? Because obviously maybe there could be some differences or similarities, but is there anything that might strike the audience tuning in terms of that kind of?
Yeah, no, I agree with Morey and his definition here. I think, from my perspective on the banking side, I've been exposed to attacks as well. And from private equity, you get a PDF and it's, you think it's from a client, you open it up and, lo and behold, that it's not from a client. And, the whole goes down. Everyone's like, why'd you do that, John? Same thing in banking. So, within banking, at least on the investment banking side, when you have access to a lot of data, and you shut down the entire organization down, people do get mad at you too. So I agree with Morey. You have to be nimble, and it's just being dynamic with the way the world is moving. And I think unless you take, like I said earlier, unless you take that first step and start thinking about how to prevent and react instead of being on the offensive, I think that it's just going to be a difficult process. So in terms of that definition, I agree with, it's Forrester did come up with it. So, it's very hard to argue with that.
Exactly. Thank you for that. And Deepak, I mean, as well, not so much the definition, but from a management consulting, a big four kind of lens, do you kind of want to add to that from your kind of world?
Yeah, I think we all agreed on Forrester sort of coined the term, no arguments there. and of course the definition has evolved. I have also seen, when Google published this white paper called Beyond Corp, they claimed that that was the first successful zero trust-like implementation at a global company. And I think that also fueled the thought process that, hey, Google did that over, I mean, it's a little bit of hidden data there. Like we don't know how much investment went in there and what was the time period. But I would say that also attracted, along with what Forrester was saying, the visibility into what zero trust could be. I think here in the US, the support that the federal government has put behind zero trust is a great motivator for both obviously public and private companies. I mean, we just heard yesterday there was a big cybersecurity focused meeting in the White House with all the leading organizations, volunteering and sharing their plans around how they want to invest in the cybersecurity realm. I think those are great, I would say, opportunities for all of us to take the next step. And also, I think again, like to what John was saying, that this is the time is right, because as we have been seeing that for an organization, whether financial services or otherwise, the bad actor can always exploit something in your ecosystem. So the readiness that an organization can bring to the table, as well as really, I have a feeling that if done right, zero trust can reduce, your impact of a breach. And again, one of the key focus areas, that's why zero trust keeps talking about, is follow the principles of least privilege, follow the principle of segmentation. And we have seen this, you can apply many technologies to it, but if those principles are followed in an ecosystem, you can definitely contain a breach. And I think that's what we all have to, look out for and design around.
Excellent. And I have another question. I'm aware that I'm getting quite a few questions. You guys are popular, so I'm gonna ask this question, and then I'm gonna leave it to the floor with the audience as well, because there's quite a few that came in. So, where will zero trust behavior lead in the B2B world? So, John, can we start with you on that?
Yeah, I think there's strong, just given work from home, I think there's really strong momentum in organizations that can drive real benefit from, having connected devices deployed under a single structure. I also believe that, although being technology agnostic, I understand that does create disparate systems that can't communicate amongst themselves when implemented. So I think there's a lot of opportunity across the ecosystem. If we look at the Gartner hype cycle chart, we're probably coming through the trough of disillusionment and coming up. And I think we're at that point where it's been around for years. People have talked about it, but we're at a point in the world where it's been noted there's significant challenges that need to be addressed, but there's traction gaining across large organizations that will trickle down into smaller groups as people leave and take best practices with them. So I think that is going to be a key driver for B2B uptake across the ecosystem and across adoption of zero trust, particularly as this continued proliferation of attacks continues, in my opinion.
Excellent. And then Morey, I saw you smile earlier, so do you want to answer this as well?
Yeah, John hit on something that just brought something really important to me, because I believe you asked the question B2B, not B2C, correct?
I asked initially B2B, but if you have a different point of view, definitely elaborate.
No, it's the thing that made me smile about John's answer is because whenever I hear B2B, I always think about what type of business to what type of business. Your business to another peer, especially in financial, whether it's a wire type transaction or to a supplier or to other types of supporting organizations from real estate. So B2B in the financial world can mean a lot of different things, hence why I perked up. And I think Zero Trust has a very interesting play there because many times when you're dealing with vendors or you're dealing with other organizations, you don't have that knowledge of the identity that's requesting access or requesting to do types of workloads. And I think Zero Trust is an excellent strategy for that type of identity classification or that type of cloud-based identity or decentralized identity management that can then be shared for B2B to enable Zero Trust in interactions. And it could be as simple as one organization granting a type of privilege or an identity from a foreign organization access without instantiating them in their own directory services. Those are the first types of steps that I think are really going to enable Zero Trust in a B2B world. But you got to also look at what is the other business. Is it a vertical? Is it something in the same plane? Those are really what are going to strive your initiatives moving forward.
Thanks for that. And Deepak, do you want to add as well to this?
Yeah, I'll build upon Morey's comment on B2B. I think I consider cloud adoption to be a bit of B2B, right? I mean, you subscribing to another company which is running a cloud. I think Zero Trust will, and we are seeing this already, significantly accelerate cloud adoption, especially for financial services. I mean, financial services have been historically a little bit more risk averse from moving to the cloud. But as concepts of community clouds are coming up or perimeter, I know it's anti-Zero Trust, but the big cloud vendors are segmenting private spaces for the financial services ecosystem. I think cloud adoption is we're gonna see a continuous increase in that. The other thing which Morey talked about, decentralized identity and establishment of trusted sources within the banking industry would emerge, right? I mean, if I am coming from a bank and I am carrying a particular token, digital token, I can be vetted at another bank because of that, right? So those sort of models will emerge. And last but not the least, I think we are living in a world of APIs and microservices now. All banking transactions are evolving to API models. And a lot of breaches have been around API. So again, the authentication, the lifecycle management of APIs is something to watch for. In fact, a lot of clients that I work with in the banking ecosystem have been running dedicated programs around API protection and API management because they know that that's the way to connect and distribute data today. So I think, again, automation along with evolution of API security, new authentication, verification, and attestation models, those what I see in the near future just around B2B.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And what I want to do now is I want to bring up some of the questions because there was quite a few of them. So I want to just get some of the questions from the audience, and then I want to then end the panel after that with a final note as well. So the first question I got from the audience was, who really should not be using Zero Trust? Who wants to take that one first? Because you guys touched upon it earlier in terms of some disagreement, but I mean, who really should not be using it?
Yeah, I mean, I can go first since we had some interesting. I think Morey had a good point of view, and then John kind of helped us to be.
We didn't jump on you with that. It was just an honest.
No, it's fair. I think. I think.
John, you could also retaliate too if you want. But definitely, let's start
That's
first. Go ahead.
Panel,
Yeah.
to just like look. I mean, I'm learning on this every day, so I appreciate all the comments. I do agree. I do agree. I mean, in totality, I feel that zero trust can be embraced by any organization. However, the full extent of zero trust may not be possible. So I think to support Morey's point of view, there will be certain environments like, I work with a few telecom clients, and I can see, zero trust in some of their networks, some of their environments may be challenging because of the gear they use, because of the service they offer. So similarly, I'm sure there are segments in any company that cannot be fully, embrace zero trust. But if you look at in totality, and again, I'm talking about business to business models, business to consumer, and business to employee, there are elements of zero trust that can be activated. So again, I think that everybody can do some amount of zero trust. They just have to establish what are those principles and models for them. But yeah, you're absolutely right that there are segments of the environment that can never embrace zero trust. So I'll leave it at that on this one.
Morey, John, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I think that's dead accurate. And I think if we were to put it in terms of concrete examples, if your organization or you're not in financials that has an established brick and mortar data center, firm location access only from there, i.e. military type work in many cases, then it's not necessarily going to be the best for you, especially if you're air gapped. You have to be able to consider that what you're operating in terms of workloads, processes, and things is flexible enough that you can establish that work from anywhere type approach. Now, Deepak hit something very key here. You don't have to do all of the tenets of zero trust in order to make it work. There are components of it that are very successful in improving any security posture. So even if you do say, look, that is running only in that data center, and we only allow people to hit that keyboard if they walk down to the room and go through 3 doors, whatever it may be, certain tenets of it can really still improve your security, including the security of those door systems that may be to those rooms. So don't think of it as an absolute yes or no, but understand that you have to have that flexibility in order to, at least again, find that on-ramp. I think Deepak's comments about a highway with on-ramps are the best example I've ever heard.
Great. So now you guys are friends, huh?
Sure, we're going to grab a beer later on the other side of the country, but it's okay.
We can have a virtual beer. So John, do you want to add to that as well, with the comments as well from
yeah, I'll just say it really boils down to what governance policies you have in place today. What your policy engine is, how do you validate, how do you make decisions on who should access information, who shouldn't access information, how do you enforce that, and how do you enable trust internally? And I think once you start answering those questions, you can figure out what components of a zero trust architecture you should have in place, because it's not a one size fits all. It's you should do something. You should at least put the first step forward to figure out what you need and who needs what and how do you permission it. And I think once you start answering those questions, you can figure out very quickly whether or not this is right for you or what components are best suited for you in your organization and your business.
Excellent, thank you. My next question is from somebody else is, how can we determine the readiness of zero trust for the sensitive data of the financial industry? So who wants to kick off with that one?
I think like any system that you approach, you have to do the proper due diligence between standard disciplines like pen testing, risk assessment, asset inventory, etc. Zero trust, even though it is a very broad topic, is not to say anybody can have access to the information. It is trusted, verified, continuously monitored, etc. So you have to look at that in detail before you could say it's good for financial data. One of the things that's apparent is the trend for financial industries to go more crypto, and there's lots of crypto out there. And if you follow the news with that every single day, there are a lot of breaches across the globe. Many of them are application API based, and some of them were even traditional server based attacks that have gotten into blockchain technology. Whether it's API based or poor hardening or patch management of the servers in question, that data or someone investing through your financial into crypto, or you may have funds that invest in it, becomes a different type of liability for you. And it goes back to that same risk assessment principles. The traditional storage transactions is one thing, but when something is occurring on the outside or the crypto is being managed in a foreign country, you're going to have to do that risk assessment as well before you would apply notions of zero trust to it. So while I'm giving a very general answer here, I have to default back to traditional controls, but put the caveat: if your financial organization is looking to embrace modern forms of currency or newer forms, the work ahead of you could be quite significant.
Excellent, thanks for that. I mean, John, Deepak, do you have any comments and things you want to add to that?
I mean, listen, I would say, if you're holding sensitive information on consumers, you should definitely start adopting, if not already, a zero trust model. And I think, I'll go back to my example earlier on Dave, the challenger bank, that, not to pick on Dave or anything like that. I'm not trying to sink their shares or anything, but, sensitive information was leaked on the net, and regulators' ears have perked up on that as well. So there's definitely, I think if you're holding info, you should definitely start adopting that model or some form or fashion of it. Breaches shouldn't be happening of consumer information, and there are simple things that can be done to mitigate that. I understand that these organizations may be big and lumpy, but some organizations that are newer, nimbler, should be able to at least dedicate some resources to ensuring that this information is being safeguarded. And that's my feeling of it. I think financial services absolutely prime and ripe for this. They should be adopting it. They should be using it in some form or fashion. I know it costs money. That's why there's consultants. Deepak is here to ensure that they're putting the proper policies and procedures in place, and you have Morey ready on the standby to deploy technology to ensure that that's happening today.
Excellent. And Deepak, the management consultant, do you want to?
Thanks, John, for that endorsement. But I couldn't agree more. I think we cannot get scared away by zero trust, and especially around data. It is a data-centric model at the end. What it's telling us is that if you have sensitive data, you today have so many different ways to protect it, which was not possible a few years ago. Technology, companies like BeyondTrust, they are innovating by the day to solve for that. And I think, that's why I know historically financial organizations have been skeptical about, I have sensitive data, I cannot put it on the cloud, I need to have it very tightly controlled. I mean, I have an example where an organization, a financial company, had all the right controls, but I go back to the API example, that was the weakest link. Through the API back channel, a hacker got into the database, right? So even that was like a segmented ecosystem behind a data center with all the right controls, and it couldn't stop the bleed. So I think financial organizations shouldn't get scared from a zero trust approach. It actually solves for the problem they have been facing historically. And you can put so many measures around the data. I mean, there were things like, I mean, I'll give another example of application ring fencing, which is a technical thing going on right now, but that was not possible a few years ago, that I can really put a fence around my app. Now that when we see that applications or services are being run on containers, you can micro segment, you can introduce things like service mesh around your applications to control that. You can have very, I would say, aggressive authentication and authorization models and products around it. So back to John's point, financial services have to embrace zero trust. It would actually alleviate the issues that they have been facing historically. And I firmly believe in case of a breach, they can limit the blast radius if they have the right zero trust model in place.
Excellent. So there's another question here, but I think we kind of answered it. I'll quickly just say it anyways. In terms of a hybrid model for zero trust, is that potentially possible? Because obviously some of you guys said yes, some of you said no, some of you said maybe, but just a quick elaboration of it could maybe go hybrid. I don't know if anybody wanted to just quickly elaborate from earlier discussions on that.
I think we all would agree, yes. If you look at what the definition is and whether you can hit many of the concepts, I think my peers would agree with it, unless they want to disagree with me, which is cool too.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we will see an hybrid model for a while before your application and services portfolio becomes modernized and comes onto the modern stack. Like, I think it's like that journey a company has to take. We talked about this earlier, all the panelists, that you can get to a different level of maturity around zero trust in your environments. And as you move to the cloud, as you modernize your application stack, zero trust solutioning will become easier. It is completely, I think some of us were talking about, if you are a newer fintech or you basically started on Amazon or Azure, your journey to embrace zero trust model is significantly shorter. If you are still a 50-50 split between cloud and on-prem, it might take you 2 to 3 years to 4 years. And not saying that you have to completely go to the cloud to be completely zero trust, but obviously the adoption rate is much higher. Actually, in one of the surveys I was reading about, which just got published a couple of months ago, as of now, all zero trust technologies that exist are equally investing in on-prem and cloud environments. And that makes me believe that even on-prem, you can go to a pretty significant extreme to embrace zero trust.
Thank you. And John, do you have any comment on that as well, in terms of?
Yep, I 100% agree. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here. Until everyone is modernized and in the 21st century, or in 2022, when everyone's gone cloud, there are still many organizations that have on-prem solutions or using a cloud-based on-prem solution. So I think that it'll evolve over time, but the hybrid approach is here, it's present, it's not going anywhere for the foreseeable future, and until everyone is comfortable with leveraging Amazon, Microsoft Azure, or any other third-party cloud provider that's out there, we're going to have a model that will be a hybrid approach.
Excellent. And time flies. So I need to end the panel soon. But before I do, I just want to give you guys about 15-second final thoughts about today's session, and your thoughts about this topic and the future of it. So I'm going to go in order of the last one. So Deepak, do you want to give your final thoughts on today's session?
Obviously, I like I've been saying, that I learn every day on this topic. It's so fluid and so evolving. So really appreciate the the commentary from Morey and John. Hopefully the audience liked some of our pointers. We are obviously available offline and through the Fintech Times to answer more questions. My final take, like last thing I want to leave this session is that one of the questions I get asked all the time is, because zero trust is so many things, how do we put a wrapper around it? Like how do we really put a box around it? And I think what we are seeing slowly is this concept of a COE coming up around zero trust. A lot of companies have started to think that this is almost like the cloud where anybody and everybody is getting impacted, and we need to expand the stakeholder group. The security organization cannot just run with the zero trust model and roadmap. We need people from the networking team. We need people from application development. We need people from the front office, the back office. If you have retail segments, which obviously a lot of banking ecosystem would have, all of them have to come together, and that's why the need of the COE is coming back. It could be a success model if a zero trust COE is put together for at least the next 3 years, where they define the principles that the company would follow around zero trust, and every solution that is out there, how are we designing that around zero trust? I think that's my recommendation to everyone to think about.
Thank you. And then Morey, your final thoughts on today's session.
I love the concept of a COE. I hadn't heard anybody vocalize that. So Deepak, I might be reaching out to you afterwards because I got some great ideas on that. For starters, I want to thank you, Richie, for moderating today, and Deepak and John for co-hosting. I'll just leave the audience with a little bit of a reminder. A lot of the concepts that we spoke about today were things around zero trust, authentication, least privilege, things of that nature. And if you are looking for vendors, don't start with the vendor. This is critical in terms of zero trust. Understand your problem, understand where you're going, and then look for the vendors to find the solution. As a CSO and CTO, many times companies will say, I need vulnerability management, where's my tool? Zero trust is very different in terms of that philosophy. Start with what you're trying to improve and then look for the vendor afterwards, not the other way around. You'll get much better success that way. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
Yeah, Richie, thank you for having me as well. And it was great to meet Morey and Deepak on the panel and having these discussions over the past couple of days with them. I've learned a tremendous amount, and this is why I'm here. And I just want to make sure that I leave everybody that's here with one thing. It's just embrace change. We have to take the first step and know where we're vulnerable and how we can collaborate as an organization to ensure that we can all work together. So those are kind of the tidbits that I'd leave, and I appreciate meeting everyone and being a part of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Morey. Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, John. And thank you, audience that was tuning in today for this panel. So in an ever-changing world, in terms of in a pre-COVID-19 world, during the pandemic, and hopefully one day in the post-COVID-19 world, obviously topics such as zero trust have been very, very important. And as you can see, there may not be one potential way of looking at it, but there's obviously, with flexibility and with collaboration, a lot of that can be done. So again, my name is Richie Santosdiaz with the Fintech Times. Thank you so much for the panelists again. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. You can follow us on social media and obviously check our website, of course. And thank you so much. Have a good one, guys.